Welcome back to another video. So in this week's video, what I wanted to do was just sit down and talk through some changes that I've had to make to both my programming and my positioning to account for the fact that my lower back flared up again during my last week of the last block. So if you have watched last week's video, you will know that during my first session of week 5 of the block, my lower back flared up again, and it was pretty bad this time. So in order to continue to progress during this off season, I've had to adapt a few things to just make sure that I am prioritizing both recovery in my lower back, but also progress on my lifts as well. So what I just want to do is break down what I'm doing on each individual movement to allow my back to get better while also push my limits and keep progressing as well as I know I can.
I'm talking how to stay smoking without a season. Now we get up and do it like.
So thankfully with squats, I haven't actually had to change a thing. Squats are not impacted by my lower back. Even when it's had its worst days, I can still squat pretty much pain-free, and it never feels any worse when I finish squatting either. So I can squat without any impact on my lower back, as long as I make sure that I am patient and I maintain the most solid brace that I can, and I just take my time, which are things that I make sure to do on squats anyway, because that is the best way to get a good squat, is just to take your time and make sure you're ticking all those boxes when you're doing it. So squats, thankfully, are still on track for what I had planned when I first tried out this whole training cycle. They're actually probably going better than planned, and I'm really excited for that. If you have watched any of my previous videos, you'll know that I've talked about the fact that squat used to be my main lift. It used to be by far my best lift. Bench is obviously a really good lift for me. My bench is super competitive, but my squat used to be that lift for me, and I want to get that back. Obviously, I want my bench to keep progressing and be really good as well, but I want my squat to get back to the level that I know it should be. So squats, I can continue to push, and I'm really, really thankful for that.
Say I let the work show off. For my kids, I go hard, gotta go hard.
Okay, so this block with bench press, thankfully, I haven't had to adjust too much. So you'll see in last week's video, if you have watched that I did have to do feet up bench. I'll just post a video of that now. So I did have to do feet up bench for the final week of my training block, for that final heavy session on bench. And that is because I couldn't set up with my feet on the floor without excruciating pain in my lower back. So thankfully, by the time the first day of week 1 of this new block arrived, my lower back pain had subsided pretty considerably. It was still there, but it was nowhere near as bad. So what I did instead, again, I'll post a video as I'm talking, I set my feet a lot further forward to reduce the amount of curvature in my lower back. So I didn't have to arch my spine as much in the lower part. So that basically just meant that there wasn't anywhere near as much pressure on my lower back. I could still feel the irritation when I was lifting and benching that way, but it was nowhere near as severe as when I had my feet tucked back in their usual position. The only annoying thing for me there is I didn't feel like I had any leg drive, I didn't feel like I had any power. It's obviously still better than benching feet up in terms of leg drive and power, but it just didn't feel great. So I had to do that for my first bench session of this block, but thankfully by the Saturday session, again, I'll post that bench now, I could bench in my usual position, feet down, and it felt good. I didn't feel like I'd made my back any worse by doing that. So I guess the only real thing with bench is I'm kind of just taking it session by session, week by week. From previous flare-ups, I'm fairly confident that it won't just suddenly flare up during a session. I'll have to bench feet up. Like, I will know before the session starts whether or not it's likely that I'm going to have to bench feet up, because it's only ever really deadlifts that trigger the irritation. Bench can make it a little bit worse, but it never causes it to be severe enough that it will impact my sessions. Hopefully that makes sense. So in terms of bench, I've not had to change anything in terms of my programming. I had to adapt my style a little bit, and if I have a day where it does just feel a bit more irritated, I will attempt to just bench my feet further forwards, and if not, I will just do feet up and just take a bit of a loss and just not load as much on the bar. But I do know from previous injuries, so I mentioned in a previous video that I had a lower back issue completely separate to this one years ago. It was pre-COVID, and I basically had to do feet up bench for about a year, maybe 18 months. But when I then got back to feet down comp bench, it had improved loads. So I know that feet up bench does have a carryover, which is why I don't get too kind of emotional or upset if I have to bench feet up for a little while. I know my bench will still progress. But thankfully, that doesn't seem to be the case, and I seem to be healthy again enough to bench feet down on the floor in my normal comp style.
Yeah, this the anthem. If you get up and get...
Okay, so changes I've made on deadlift. So you can probably imagine deadlift is the lift that I've had to make the most adjustments with. my programming has changed quite considerably for deadlifts. So the plan for this block was on a Wednesday to do my primary deadlift day, to do a top triple, and then back off sets of 6. Now, rather than that, I am doing 3 cluster singles. So 3 by 1, 1 minute in between each single, and that is it. So I've cut the back offs, and rather than doing a full triple, I'm doing basically a cluster set of singles. So this week, I'll play the video now. I did 150 for 3 singles with a minute in between each. The reason I'm doing this is just to allow myself to fully reset in between each rep, to just take my time and just reduce the risk of any kind of irritation and keep my positioning solid as possible. I haven't got any back offs after that because I didn't want too much exposure to the movement, because I just want to let my lower back recover. So rather than doing back off work, I am now doing RDLs, and it is barbell RDLs, and I'll place the video now. It was just 2 sets of 12 with 50 kilos, super submaximal. I wanted to do 3 sets, but I felt a little bit of a pump in my lower back after 2, so I called it there. I think over the weeks I might try and get 3 sets, but even if it's just for this block I just do 2, that's fine. It's just some additional stimulus to help complement my deadlifts while I can't actually push my main conventional comp lift. With that, I have now also added in a secondary deadlift day. So on a Saturday, I have introduced sumo again. Just ascending sets. So this block I'm doing ascending triples. If you watch the videos here, I did ascending triples up to 140. Unfortunately, my phone did run out of storage by the time I got to the 140, so I won't include that clip. I won't put all the clips in just because it's 4 sets of ascending triples. They all look pretty much the same. I jumped 5 kilos at a time. So I started at 120, then 125, 130, 135, and then 140 to finish. They felt really good. There was no irritation, no back pain or anything like that. So I'm just going to keep sumo in. I don't ever think sumo will be my strongest version of deadlifts. I think conventional is better for my leverages. I am more built for conventional, and I'm more confident with the conventional as well. But whilst I can't do too much volume on conventional, I don't see any harm in just putting that extra sumo day in, again, just for extra stimulus for my deadlift. So that's the main changes I've had to make there. I think that's probably about it for this video. I don't really have too much more to comment on. They are the main changes I've made. My lower back is feeling considerably better. Like, I still don't class myself as being injured. It was just a flare-up. It was quite a bad flare-up, but I think it was made worse for the fact that I was away at the time, so I had to spend a lot of time sitting down in the car travelling and things. So my lower back is feeling pretty much 100% now. I am now about to start week 2 of this block, so I will give you an update in the next video of how I'm getting on, how my back's feeling and things like that. I hope you've enjoyed this video. I just want to sit down and go through some changes I've made. If you ever find yourself having a lower back issue, obviously it may be completely different to mine. What I'm doing might not work for you, but I think it's just important to know there are options to work around an injury or an irritation where you can still progress. Like, I am still confident this is going to be the best off season for me. I'm going to make tons of progress, and by the time I step back on the platform, I will be a completely different lifter. And I'm not going to take away from that confidence just because my lower back has flared up. Like, I know I can work around that. So hopefully you will find this video interesting or helpful in some way. If you have any questions, just get in touch, leave a comment below. But please like, subscribe and comment, and I will see you next week for the next one.
That's what I stand on. Loyalty and trust is what I stand on. Family and love is what I stand on. Talking big, big. I knew that one day that I could make it big, big. I'm talking how to stay smoking with